Noreen Womack. I'm a pediatrician with the St. Luke's School Mobile Clinics in now 4 school districts: Nampa, Mountain Home, Caldwell, and Boise.
Okay, perfect. You can start whenever you're ready.
Great. So I know, go ahead to the next slide, please. I know that this is a little different topic. We usually do clinical presentations with Project Echo, but I believe this is an important topic. And one of my objectives is to have you feel the same way. We're going to do a little bit of just basic Idaho Legislature 101. And in full disclosure, I have no formal training in government other than my senior high school government class. I'm sure you guys did too, but that's the extent of my expertise. But 5 years ago, I founded an organization that I'll talk about later when I realized that what the Idaho legislators do is so important in terms of our day to day with our children. And so we'll talk about that a little bit later. I want to convince you that things that happen in Idaho legislative session really do impact the work that we do with our kids. And then at the end, we'll do a deep dive with just a few bills. Next slide. So, Idaho Legislation 101. We have 105 elected officials that convene in the Idaho Capitol every year. There are 35 voting districts, and that's why we have 70 representatives, because we have 2 from each district and then a senator in each district. I'm in District 18, and I really hope that each and every one of you who are listening can also name not just your district number, but who your representatives and senators are. So something to think about. Takes about 10 seconds in an internet search. Um, in Idaho, so every state is different, but in Idaho, we have a session that runs from the first week of January and it ends typically mid-late March. The end of session is called sine die, and I'm sure I'm pronouncing that wrong. But what it means in Latin is without a set day or time, because they have a date that they try to adhere to, but they really can't end until they get all their business done. So they shoot for late March, but for instance, this past year, they didn't end till I think April 4th. So there are committees in the Senate and the House. There are 10 committees in the Senate, and there are 15 committees in the House of Representatives. The committees are where the bulk of the work is done in legislature in terms of legislation itself. Um, every elected official has to sit on several committees. And like I said, that's where a lot of the work is done. Some committees exist in both chambers. So, for instance, the committees that I deal with most in the work that I do, the volunteer work that I do, are Health and Welfare and the Education Committee. Part of what the legislature is trying to do is balance our state budget, which is a Herculean task at the best of times. And then, of course, also introducing new legislation. Fun fact, this year, 2025, ran from January 6th to April 4th. And in the last 30 years, we saw the most pieces of legislation introduced than all the years prior. Almost 1,400 pieces of legislation went through. They didn't all become bills, but they all needed to be addressed initially, at least in committee, and then some made it all the way through to become law. Next slide. Some other things about this most recent session. So because of the election last November, there was a huge turnover in the legislators, 23%, and that is also unprecedented. It was a really large number of what they call freshman legislators who are doing this for the very first time, going from wherever their district is, coming to the Capitol, and just kind of learning the ropes. The other thing about this session is that a lot of what they call Main Street Republicans lost their primaries last spring. And Main Street Republicans, if you're not familiar with that term, it's actually a nationwide organization. And those are Republicans that define themselves as more conservative. Currently, in the Senate, we have 29 Republicans and 6 Democrats. And then in the House, we have 61 Republicans and 9 Democrats. And I know it doesn't surprise probably anybody listening that we are a red state. The other thing of importance is that a lot of committee chairs were new this year. So in the Senate, more than half of the committee chairs were new, and in the House, 10 of the 28 committee chairs were new. Usually, committee chairs sit for sometimes, in some instances, decades. So having this many brand new chairs was really different. Committee chairs hold a lot of power, and we'll go over why in a little bit here. Next slide. So actually, this is where we're going to talk about why the chairs are so important. So I don't know how many of you were around as kids when there was Schoolhouse Rock, but there was a Schoolhouse Rock song and little cartoon about how a bill becomes law. I should have just played that instead of giving you this dry slide, but we're just going to go through this really quickly. So the way a bill gets introduced is any legislator can introduce a bill. It can be an idea that they had themselves. It could be an idea that a constituent gave them. It could be something that became law in another state, and you're like, gosh, I want that to happen in Idaho. Or it can be handed to them from, for instance, like the National Party. But anyway, any legislator can write and introduce a bill. That is called the main sponsor for the bill. And a lot of times, once a legislator sponsors a bill, they try to get co-sponsors. And it's a good idea, for instance, if you're a Republican, to try to get a Democratic sponsor too. It just helps promote the bill and have it move forward. So once you write a bill, you choose the committee it fits most with. So if it's a bill regarding immunizations, then it would go to the Health and Welfare Committee. So if it either in the Senate or the House. It doesn't go straight to committee, it goes to the chair of the committee. And again, the reason why the chair of the committee is important is because if the chair does not feel like that bill should continue, they can table it, which means basically they just don't let it be heard in committee at all. Sometimes they call it putting it in a drawer. Sometimes they call it the chair killing a bill. But that's how much power a chair has. If they just don't like it, it doesn't even matter the reason. It just never sees the light of day. However, if the chair of the committee believes it should go forward, then that sponsor of the bill will go in front of that committee, let's say Health and Welfare, and present the bill, why they introduced it, why it's great, how there's usually a fiscal note attached to it, meaning how much is this bill going to cost. And then after they sit down, then this is really the only time there can be public testimony for or against that bill. And that means anybody. You can have written testimony, you can appear in person. There is a process where you have to, of course, sign up for that. Just because you go in there to testify in person doesn't mean you're always going to get time to, because they only have time for a certain number of people in their testimony. But at the end of that meeting, which usually only lasts an hour or two, the committee will then go to vote on it, whether it should stop right there or go on to the floor. Once it gets to the floor, there's another debate. This is closed, so there's no public testimony allowed at that point. Excuse me. Then there's a general vote, and then again, it can either die there or they approve for it to go forward. The next place that bill goes is to the other chamber. So if it started in the House, it'll go to the Senate, but it won't go to the Senate floor. It goes to the Senate Health and Welfare Committee. So it'll go to that same committee that the first chamber held it in. Same process there. The chair can either table it or put in drawer or let it go forward. Again, that sponsor has to get up in front of that committee, make their case. Then there can be public testimony, and then that committee will vote whether that can go on or not. If it goes to the second floor and passes, then it goes to the governor's desk, and the governor can do three things with that bill. They can, Governor Little can sign it into law, he can veto it, or he can actually do nothing. If he takes no action after a certain number of days, it still becomes law. Next slide. So I think it's important, since we have a state where we're overwhelmingly have a majority party, to know what the priorities of that majority party are. This is all public information. They want people to know about these things. So we're just going to go over a few again that might affect us who care for children or in the public schools. So the overarching theme is reduction in spending. And two of the most expensive things that our state is responsible for are number one, health insurance in the form of Medicaid, and number two, public education. So those are the two most expensive things that our state in our state budget. So one of the priorities of the majority party is to reduce the spending in Medicaid, including scaling back Medicaid expansion that was voted in a couple of cycles ago, reducing Medicaid reimbursement rates to providers, and then as of this year, introducing work requirements, and then biannual enrollment. So biannual enrollment means that families who might qualify for Medicaid have to go through that process of qualifying for Medicaid twice in a year instead of once a year. So there is thought that that is going to decrease the number of people who are able to do that biannual enrollment, even if they do qualify. And so there's the risk of children and families losing Medicaid. Another priority is, again, in the name of decreasing just overall government spending, to decrease public education funding, which, and this is my opinion, it's we're already last in the nation for public education funding. So I believe it's not necessarily a good idea to do that, but that is one of their priorities. And we're going to talk a little bit about the school voucher bill that might redirect state dollars to private education. And then, oh, just FYI, just today I read that we already seeing a decrease in enrollment in public schools as of this year, to the tune of 1%, something like 3,000 or more students less than before. Next is increased overall parental powers and freedom, and we'll talk about the parental consent law a little bit. Abolish immunization requirements. I know that there's going to be a bill introduced in 2026, this next session, to introduce a bill that's very similar to the Florida bill.
Housekeeping, I'm just getting your trash.
Hang on one second. Oh, excellent. Sorry. So similar to what's happening in Florida, they're going to try to abolish immunization requirements in the state of Idaho. And then lastly, stricter immigration laws. Next slide, please. So I know that in Amy's slides, they go over the parental consent law in a little bit more detail. So I'm not going to belabor this. Hang on one second, sorry.
As we're taking a pause, does anyone have any questions so far? Not hearing anything. Okay.
So sorry. All right, so like I said, I'm not going to belabor this law. The parental consent law was passed actually in 2024. And the gist is that this requires prior consent of a minor's parent before any healthcare service can be given under the age of 18. Before this law was passed, that age was 14. And then there were exceptions for specifically contagious diseases like sexually transmitted infections, and there are no longer any exceptions like that. And then, like I said, I'm going to let Tracy go over that in a little bit more detail. Next slide. So as of this year, there's the Senate Bill 1023. So S stands for Senate, so that tells you which chamber the bill originated from. So Senate Bill 1023 was called the Medical Freedom Bill, and it actually did pass both chambers and went to Governor Little, which he vetoed. It was his only veto of the entire year. This bill, if passed, would have banned businesses and any Idaho governments, whether it's local, county, or state, so any level, from requiring any medical interventions of any kind. So it was a pretty far-reaching bill. And Governor Little did veto it, and I included his quote after he vetoed it. This was his explanation. Medical freedom is an Idaho value. However, this bill removes parents' freedoms to ensure their children stay healthy at school because it jeopardizes the ability of schools to send home sick students with highly contagious conditions, including measles, lice, ringworm, pink eye, strep throat, etc., and other illnesses that disrupt families' lives. So what happened was after he vetoed that bill, the sponsor quickly turned around and created Senate Bill 1210, which this is my terminology, Medical Freedom Bill 2.0, because it was very, very similar to the Medical Freedom Bill, except for two things. It did take out, it did allow schools to send home sick students, and it also did not include vaccines in the definition of medical interventions. And I was hoping Amy or maybe Tracy, this has been the interpretation of many people on a state level, and so this is the interpretation that is most widely accepted. Next slide. Okay, one other bill from this past year, which may impact us that work in the schools, is the House Bill 93 Idaho Parental Choice Tax Credit, what's also called school vouchers. So this is a $50 million voucher program that will use public funding to pay for private schooling. So any family up to $5,000 per child can use funding from the state to place their child in any sort of private or tutoring or homeschooling, even out-of-state schools, using public tax dollars. This, even though it did pass, is not a law yet because it's in Idaho Supreme Court, where they're questioning its constitutionality. Some other concerns around this bill are the cost of the bill, because there are some other states that have a similar bill where it turned into like a $50 million to like hundreds of millions of dollars. And another concern with this bill is just the lack of accountability for those dollars. All of you that work in the public school system realize that, you have to account for every single dollar that you guys spend, where it's going, and there's a lot of reporting you need to do. With this money, there's not really much in terms of accountability measures. Really, the only thing that's even close to that is in this bill, it says there's a survey that will be distributed by the tax commission that participating parents must fill out. So again, the concern there is decreased student body, and then potential decrease in public school funding. Next slide. So here, just as important as some the bills that did pass are some examples of bills that did not pass this past session. One of them was House Bill 382, or immigrant status reporting. This bill said that Idaho public educational institutions, including elementary and secondary schools, need to record the immigration status and nationality of all enrolled students, and they need to report that information to the superintendent of public instruction, so it can be published on the State Department of Education's website. So this is a bill that did not pass. Another bill that did not pass this past session is House Bill 273, which was firearms in schools. I will say I've been paying close attention to session in the last 5 years, and there's typically at least once a year a very similar bill to this one, where in this one in particular would have allowed school employees, including in elementary schools, to conceal carry a loaded handgun if they had a permit, a concealed weapon permit. Next slide. So here are our state level organizations that can help us help the legislators with information about the impact that their bills may have. I actually am asking those on the call today for some feedback about SNOWY, or the School Nurse Organization of Idaho. It's wrong. I put association, but it's organization, so I apologize. But the School Nurse Organization of Idaho, or SNOWY, is a fantastic organization. I've worked with them a little bit, but what I don't know for sure, and I'm relying on people who might be members of SNOWY to tell me, is how involved they get with during session. Another organization is Idaho Education Association. The organization that I helped create, along with Diane Garvey, is Idaho Children Are Primary. We are 5 years old now, and we are a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization. And we rate legislative bills that pertain to children. We typically rate only about 20 bills per session, but once we rate a bill, we really do try to reach the sponsors of the bill, committee members that might influence voting on the bill, and really try to get the evidence-based information to those legislators who are players with that particular bill. And then probably should have highlighted Idaho Voices for Children, because if you guys want to get involved, that's probably the organization to go to for involvement. And I took this straight from their website. They champion policies that help kids and families thrive in areas of health, child safety and well-being, education, and school readiness. And I've seen them in action over the years, and they really do have a heart for kids and kids' issues and keeping them safe and healthy. And then the Idaho chapter of the American Academy of Pediatrics is also a fantastic organization. Next slide.
Noreen, before we move on to the next slide, you said that maybe there was someone here from Snowy who might have more information on Helmball.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if
And they can
anyone
either put it in the chat or
Yeah.
speak now or later.
I am Teresa Berg. I'm the president of Snowy.
Oh.
We have been working in our conference and also with our representatives from the different areas to try and see if we can get some input onto the epinephrine. It has now come out in a nasal form, so we're trying to get some legislation passed so that we can change the wording of the current policy so that we can include different forms of epinephrine for the kids in our schools.
Thank you, Teresa. That was fantastic, because the other thing that happens once you start working with legislators, for instance, on a particular piece of legislation like what you just mentioned, then you know that person and they know you, and you've created somewhat of a working relationship. And then if there's something else that you would like to bend somebody's ear about, you can go back to that person. It is so easy. I don't know if, Teresa, this is your experience, but for me, it's really easy to reach out to any legislator, wherever they're from, whatever their political affiliation. They are very gracious and they're so accessible. People come from other states, or I've gone to other states, and they're always remarking about how accessible our elected officials are. You could just, make an appointment and go sit and talk to them for an hour, and it's really very interesting. And so I'm hoping you're having that experience as well. And thank you for that.
We had Ron Taylor come and talk to us in
Oh, yeah.
June and help explain some of the policies and some of the ways that we need to get involved so we can get this passed. He's been a good help
Fantastic.
for us.
Anybody else?
I was just going to say
Anna.
that I would love to be in contact with you. I'm also working with a representative on a similar goal. So I'd be more than happy to share kind of where I am at with him, or if there's any way I can support you if you guys are further along the way of getting that code changed.
Yeah, so Jocelyn, I think you can share my email.
Yeah.
Because if I'm not the right person, then I at least know the right people to direct you to, depending on the issue you're talking about. Be happy to help. Again, that was my biggest goal today, is just get people thinking about this and paying attention. So yeah, key points. Pay attention and stay involved. January 2026 will be upon us before we know it. The Idaho Statesman, I don't want to necessarily promote one periodical over another, but I know that the Idaho Statesman, for example, has a newsletter you can sign up for free that goes over legislation that's happening real time in during session. And if anybody knows any other periodicals that do something similar, please put them in the chat. That's just the one that I happen to know about. And then again, Idaho Voices for Children is probably the top organization to help you do things that are actionable. They actually have something called an action tool. That's one of their drop downs on their homepage. But there's also Women's League of Voters of Idaho that's really active. There's the Mormon Women for Ethical Government. There's a lot of people rowing in the same direction. And yeah, happy to direct anybody who's interested in to learning more. And vote, of course. And my last slide didn't really have much. I got a lot of this information from just the Idaho government website. So I think that's my last slide.
Okay, perfect. And did you just want me to just put out your email? So,
Yes, I'm fine with that.
yes, okay, great. I'll put that in the chat. Before we move into our liability considerations piece, does anyone have any questions for Noreen?
I don't have any questions, but one comment with respect to thank you, Noreen, first of all, for just like providing us with that information. I think it's super helpful to talk more and learn about more of how we can be involved. I do serve on the Idaho Pharmacy and Therapeutics Committee. And so with respect to epinephrine, nasal epinephrine, we did just vote recently to make that formulary with Medicaid. And so that will be a change in terms of formulation and that becoming formulary and more easily accessible to families. So we thought that that was a big win. We had lots of support around that. And so that will be a change that you'll see in the upcoming year.
Okay, that's really great. Thank you for sharing. Okay, if we don't have anything else to add for this, then we can move forward with some slides on liability considerations. Tracy, you ready to go?
I am. First, I just wanted to thank Casey for that and his participation in the legislative process, as well as Noreen. That was excellent. I learned a couple things, and I was busy Googling while you were talking to check what my congressional representative's name is and what district. So I learned that, but I also wanted to pass along to you all that the educational board, there's 14 congressional members, and one of them that represents Congressional District 28 is my cousin, Dan Garner. So I just wanted to make sure those of you know that we have a connection on the education department right now. I don't know how far that'll go, but I just wanted you to know that. So if you have any questions, you can reach out and feel like there's a connection or an easy connection. So thank you again, Noreen. That was very informative.